Welcome to episode 233 of the Actual Astronomy Podcast. I'm Chris, and joining me is Shane. We are amateur astronomers, so love looking up at the night sky, and this podcast is for anybody else who likes going out under the stars. So Shane, we had mentioned we were interested in doing some more deep dives, had heard from a few people that they'd like to hear them. We're always happy to do these. And then Clint, who I've been chatting to about, he's recently purchased a Takahashi 100mm, was the first to write in voting for Scorpius.
Yeah, great suggestion. It's prominent right now, and more prominent for southern or observers further south than you and I, but we still have an opportunity to observe some of the stuff there, and I think it's a great one to talk about.
Yeah, and then very shortly after that, we received one from Jim, who wrote us about doing deep dives in general, and I was kind of blown away by his email and suggestions there. Do you mind if I just read his email to us?
Sure.
All right. So Jim writes, "Greetings, Chris and Shane. I've listened to your Observations from Grasslands podcast, and I have some suggestions for some deep dives episodes. Here's a list of those deep dives you've already done, along with the months, the year those constellations will be reasonably well placed for observing. This list is those prominent constellations that haven't yet been deep dived, also with the best months for their viewing." So I was so blown away by this email.
Yeah, I'm super thankful. For a little while, I was tracking like our, episode number and the title of the episode, just so we had a kind of a quick reference if we wanted to go back and see what we've done. And then I just kind of lost the momentum there, and I stopped tracking it. So to have this where we can do a Control F, to find keywords or whatever is super handy.
Yeah, no, that is super good. And yeah, I remember you were tracking them for a while, and we can kind of go through because we keep all the notes in a bit of a compendium there. But it was so handy just to get these two lists there, the ones that we've completed and the ones that we didn't. I feel like we've got to give Jim some sort of producer credits now every time we do a deep dive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Jim goes on to say, if I could make a suggestion, it would be to work through by season. Excellent suggestion. If I could only pick one constellation, it would have to be Sagittarius. And then he goes on to say, between Sagittarius and Scorpius, there is so much going on, and their arrival low in the southwest is a welcome harbinger of the late summer observing season, when the warm, languid nights are getting longer and the cold nights of winter are still far away. These days, Sagittarius is my favorite constellation. And so he mentioned both Sagittarius and Scorpius, with Sagittarius taking precedent in his list, I think, because we had done some Scorpius deep dive in the past. But I thought, I looked at it and we didn't cover some of the stuff that I wanted to chat on. And so considering that both Clint and Jim had mentioned Scorpius, I thought, maybe we should just hit Scorpius again since it is timely. And I've been observing a lot in Scorpius recently.
Yeah, I think it's a great suggestion. So I'm excited for this one.
Yeah. So let's see. So Jim does talk a little bit about, he makes a recommendation here for DEET as well, and non-DEET insect repellents. So we're having a lot of mosquitoes here, and he talks about the harmful impacts of DEET and other chemical insecticides on your eyepiece, plastic, or anything else that you're working with. So typically what I do, Shane, I don't know how you handle it, but I take like a rag or something like that, and I put it in my hat, and I kind of put it on me, but I don't put it on my hands where I'm going to contact eyepieces. That's difficult to do. I'm not sure how you handled mosquito repellent. I know you've used some of those. I don't know what they are, but they're like a CO2 cartridge that repels mosquitoes. Do you want to just mention that briefly?
Yeah, so I do kind of a multi-pronged approach. Number one is I always try to cover myself up. So even on a warm night, I'll try to wear long sleeves, pants, maybe lighter material if it's a warmer night. But
Mm-hmm.
it helps me stay warm, but it also helps keep the mosquitoes away.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I'm wearing like a toque, I'll spray that sometimes with mosquito repellent, far away from any of my gear. But what I use most often is a thermocell, and that's the brand or the what the unit is called. And the thermocell has like a catalytic burner. It runs off of butane, and it has a odorless, smokeless pad, mostly smokeless anyway, that will just sort of slowly burn, I guess, or it heats up and it emits some mosquito repelling stuff into the air. And it usually creates, I think they say about a 20 square foot zone. It sort of sets up and keeps mosquitoes away. And it does a really good job. Now, the times where it doesn't is if like there's times where there's just so many mosquitoes that it overwhelms you. And, at those times, the thermocell doesn't seem very effective. But other than that, it does. And I quite like it. Yeah.
And I'm just looking here. I'm looking this up, and he had made the recommendation of something, and I guess it's out of Canada, but I hadn't really heard this much of this before, called picaridin.
Yeah, something like that.
And then he had it spelled two different ways, but actually see it spelled two different ways, Icaridin. And maybe it's a very similar product. It's maybe like, the generic product version of it. But it also looks really inexpensive. It's $8.99 on Amazon anyway for 150 mils of the Icaridin. And it's DEET-free. It's all natural, blah, blah. I've seen some of them mix it with... they mix it with like eucalyptus or something like that. So yeah, that makes me pretty excited. And its claim to fame is that not only does it repel mosquitoes as much, it's non-toxic to humans and pets, and then it doesn't impact plastics at all. So, I think I gotta maybe try to give this a shot. So yeah, I'd have to try that out. Bugs are bad this year, so I appreciate it.
Yeah. The thermocell uses a different active ingredient. It's elethrins or something like that, and it's a synthetic compound, but it mirrors or is the same as a compound that's naturally found in certain flowers that repel mosquitoes.
Oh yeah.
So the toxicity is supposed to be, not not anywhere near what DEET is like. So. I don't know how it is around plastics. I should do a little bit of research on that, I suppose. But
yeah, it sounds. I mean, I've been around it, and sometimes some of these chemicals can bother me a little bit too. DEET doesn't, and neither does the thermocell. So I always have to try a little bit. So I'll have to see if this one bothers me. It sounds like it's totally natural, so it should be fine. Eucalyptus I find really strong. Other than that, it's fine, doesn't bother me. So those are some interesting options there, I think, for fighting the mosquitoes and other maybe biting insects of the night. Yeah.
It's always nice to have some options there, because there's been some nights where the mosquitoes are so bad that I can't observe. Like they just make it impossible because of, they're flying in and around your face, but then, biting the heck out of you, which is not much fun.
I've had them so thick I can't even see the stars.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, speaking of biting insects, Shane.
Yeah. Hey.
We're going to talk about Scorpius, which I know is an arachnid. So, have you ever seen a scorpion in real life?
Yes, I have.
Oh, yeah. Where did you see that?
Well, just like in there was a museum exhibit here that had like snakes of the plains, and there were some scorpions as well that they had that were indigenous to Saskatchewan. So it's kind of interesting.
I've never seen the Saskatchewan scorpion, but when I was sleeping in the basement of a wine press in Italy, I did see a scorpion. It was uncomfortable. Let me put it that way. Mm-hmm. So the scorpion constellation, the constellation Scorpius, It's one of those few constellations which really does seem to match up. Like, strangely enough, like, you think of a Scorpion as is a fairly unique pattern. But Scorpius the Scorpion, as far as that star pattern goes, Shane, I think that is a pretty good match. How about you?
Yeah, well, in particular, like, the distinctive feature to me of a Scorpion is that tail, kind of curls up, and it's quite prominent in the constellation.
Yeah, exactly. So that curling tail, and then now it used to have two sets of claws. Now it's just one because Libra was made out of the other claw. But sort of if you combine that, I mean, boy, it certainly does look like a Scorpion, at least to me. So what's your favorite thing to look at when you look at Scorpius, or what do you think of when you think of Scorpius?
I think M4 is probably the most popular thing in Scorpius, or at least that's the one that jumps out for me when I think of Scorpius. It's just taking a look here. It's fairly decent size globular cluster. Just right near Antares, and then of course Antares is actually maybe I should start there. Antares is go ahead. More famous named stars in the sky.
Yeah,
it's bright. It's noticeably orange, I think, even to the naked eye.
Yeah,
and it's a fairly challenging double star to split. And what's interesting about Antares as a double is the companion. Most people report seeing like a green color associated with that one.
Yeah.
So that's kind of neat. And I've never split that. My second night, so when I was in Grasslands a few weeks ago, on night 2, I was going to attempt splitting Antares, but then night 2 was cloudy, so I didn't have a chance. But how about you? What sort of stands out for you in Scorpius?
Well, yeah, I kind of have my list broken down into easy and challenging things. So M4, of course, like you find Scorpius, and then of course Antares sticks out. It's due south on these sort of late June nights and into July. It just kind of sits there because kind of like we were saying in the last episode, as the nights begin to get longer here next week. Of course, the sky is darker a little bit earlier, and it's darker at almost about the same rate as the constellations are making their progression, through the seasonal progression from east to west. So really, it just kind of seems to hang there for the month of July. And when you find Antares, just to the right or just west of Antares is that Messier 4 globular cluster. And it's just an amazing cluster to look at because it's really large and extended. I don't know what the arc minutes are of it, but it's a really big globular cluster, like pretty shocking when I was looking at it, even at 25 power and then 40 power in my 5.5 inch telescope a couple weeks back. It's huge, and you are beginning to resolve it even in just like a small 4 or 5 inch telescope. And you can start to see all these different star chains that are kind of meandering, inside of Messier 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a wonderful object, as are a lot of the Messiers. There's maybe some objects in that list that are kind of questionable in terms of prominence, but a lot of these globulars are really outstanding, and M4 is no exception.
Yeah, in fact, it was discovered by Chezereau in 1745 and then cataloged by Messier in 1764. And like you were saying, it can be resolved. And it was the first globular cluster which people were able to resolve into individual stars. So that's kind of its claim to fame. Mm-hmm. And again, like if you have a small telescope, you can begin to get that partial resolution even in that 4-inch range, I think.
Which is pretty phenomenal. A lot of globulars do require some aperture to start to see those individual stars, which is where the big Dobbs usually come into play. Like when Mike and I were looking at M53 at Grasslands, it was just phenomenal how that looked in his 12-inch. And it was a lot less phenomenal in the 4-inch, let me tell you.
Yeah, for sure. for sure. Another nearby globular, I'm not sure if you ever looked at this one before, is NGC 6144, and it's just northwest of Antares. It sort of forms, it's closer. It forms a bit of a triangle with M4 and Antares in 6144, but it's closer to Antares, and it's sort of just northwest of it by only like about a degree or so.
No, I've never looked at that one, but that's pretty easy to find. I should take a look at it.
Yeah, and so, here's sort of the caveat. From our latitude, it's approaching 10th magnitude. I think it's like about 9.8 photographic magnitude anyway. It might be a hair brighter, maybe approaching 8th magnitude visual. It's a low core stellar density globular, and although you can't see the X-rays, it's a host of many X-rays. Now, for me, the way that I use it is it makes a good test for conditions here at our latitude. So if I can see 6144 there through one of my small telescopes, then I know that's a really good night because I'm able to see something around 9th magnitude for a deep sky object. Only maybe 15 degrees above the horizon means that we're having excellent conditions throughout the overhead sky.
Yeah, no, that's good advice too. It's always nice to have some objects like that you can look at and determine how good the conditions are that night, and that can change entirely how you approach the whole observing session.
Yeah. Sort of moving on from Antares, if we go halfway from Antares to Grapheus, which is the northernmost star in the cloud that remains in the constellation proper, if you go halfway from Antares to Grapheus, then you land on M80, which is the 7th magnitude globular cluster there. Sort of in that. There's not much else around that area. But M80 is neat because it has a lot of blue stragglers that are much younger than the cluster itself. So I often forget to take a look at M80 when I'm up in that area. For some reason, I didn't look at it when I was scanning around there the other night. Not sure if you have any sort of observations of it, or are you sort of in the same boat with me where you kind of always forget to look at M80 unless you specifically put it on your list of things to take a look at?
Yeah, 100%. I've observed the Messier list in its entirety, and that was many, many years ago. And most of those observations were between an 8-inch Dob and a 12-inch Dob. But I really have a desire to redo the Messier list, or at least spend more time looking at the Messiers when I'm out and about. Because they look different in different telescopes and different apertures, but they're just, a lot of them are really cool to observe. So I feel like I neglect them because I've already observed them. But just to refresh my memory, I want to start going back to them.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. And M80 is nice. It's a bit of a tight globular. I find that I have trouble picking it up in the binoculars unless I'm at a really dark site. In the telescope, though, it does pop out, but I think the other night when I was scanning around, I just didn't scan in that direction because I think the 5.5 inch would pick it up nicely considering how well it did in the other objects I was looking at. Yeah,
for sure. That makes a lot of sense.
If we keep on to Grapheus, though, is Grapheus a double star? Do I recall you saying that before we launched the recording?
Yeah, so Grapheus is a really nice double star. Mike and I looked at it at Grasslands again a few weeks ago, and he brought it to my attention. He said, "Did you know Grapheus is a double?" And I said, "No, actually, I don't." And we observed it, and it's also on the RASC Double Star Observing Program list. We had Blake on last week. Blake is the creator of this list. So what's really interesting? So visually, Grapheus is a pretty easy split. But what I didn't realize at the time, and I now know, is that there's 3 stars in this system, not 2. Now, what Mike and I easily split was the A star, so that's the primary one, and the C star. So they're very colorful. The C star is kind of orange. The A star is, maybe a whitish gold. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting is there's a B star in this system, and the AB separation is extremely tight, like 1.1 arc second.
Yeah.
So you're really going to have to crank up the magnification to see all 3. and or have some aperture to support, the attempt at this observation. But Grapheus is very easy to locate, and it's a 3-star system. So it's a great target for anybody interested in doubles. And again, that AB is a real challenge. So it'll test your optics and your observing capabilities. So add that to your list.
And it's a pretty, I forget the magnitude on it, but it's it's a naked eye star even from the city though, right? It's like what, like 3rd magnitude or something? Grapheus must be like 2.8 or something.
So it looks like it's about 5-ish.
Oh, really?
5.2 is the primary, I think. I'm not sure what the sorry, I'm just taking a look at the M1 and M2, what that represents here on this list. But anyway, one magnitude rating is 4.9, the other one's 5.2. So
those must be for the pairs though, because I just looked it up and it's 2.62.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay.
For the primaries. Yeah. Because just like eyeballing it, I was just like, not that I do stellar magnitude measurements, but I was thinking it's like 2.8. So it's saying 2.6. Yeah.
Got it.
So,
okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. And then, apparent magnitude. And then, it lists the first companion is about 4.9. And then, the other one. Yeah. Yeah. So that makes a little bit more sense there. Yeah. Sorry about that. Wasn't looking to put anybody on the spot.
No worries. It's a super cool double. So again, highly recommend that. And then I guess if you are in that region and you really want to challenge, you could try to split Antares as well. Yeah.
Did you ever see the false comet? Have you ever been far enough south to see the bottom vertebrae in the tail?
I don't think I have seen that. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I've seen it a few times. So this is, the comet head is NGC 6231 and then combined with Colander 316 and Trumpler 24, which are open clusters in that area. Mm-hmm. They form sort of the aptly named false comet, which has been, I think, recognized by lots of observers over the millennia. I know GB Hodiurna has an observation of it as well. I could be misremembered, but I think Abdur al-Sufi, when he published his work in, I think, 964 AD, his book of fixed stars, I think he also mentioned it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it's what it is a large open cluster that's where the tail turns. So if you follow the tail down and you're at an observing location that's below about 47 degrees north latitude, you can actually see the tail turn, and then it cuts across just above the horizon if you're 47, and then it turns back to the north and ends up at Shola. But where it turns, where it kind of makes that almost right angle left jog to the east, that's where NGC 6231 is. And it's this beautiful open cluster, and it's about half a degree north of Zeta Scorpii, which is that bottom star in the Stinger. And, that's a beautiful star to look at in itself. I think it's actually it's not a triple star or anything, but there's sort of 3 stars that make it up, if I'm remembering correctly. And this grouping of these 3 clusters, and there's some other material there, is part of a swath of young bluish stars that are known as the Scorpius OB1 Association. And, subsequent observers have indicated they think it looks like a false comet. And I think it does. I think definitely it does look like a comet.
That's one I really need to observe. It's been on my list for a long time, and I just need to make it a priority next time I'm out.
Yeah, when I lived in Nova Scotia, I thought that I always wanted to see it, but I could never find the right spot or conditions. Either it's so low there at 45, getting close to 46 degrees north latitude, that you really, really need a perfect horizon. You need to be out looking up over the ocean. From Ontario, where I was, which was about 2.5 degrees further south, was just enough that. And where we observed there was in fields, not fields like we have here, but pretty decently sized fields. we could see it clearing the horizon for a couple hours every night. And I was able to observe it there on a few occasions. And then when I went to Hawaii, of course, it was 20 degrees higher than that. So was pretty easy to observe in the binoculars, from the slopes of Haleakala. That was truly a spectacular sight.
Yeah, that would be ideal from that latitude and on top of the volcano.
Yeah. Yeah, and then after I made that observation, I think it was the following year. It was a year or two later. I was back visiting in Nova Scotia, and we had a beautiful series of nights. I was there for about 2 weeks, and I think I was there for either 2 weeks or 10 days. Anyway, I got like 7 or 8 observing nights in, and on a spot that was overlooking the ocean. And I was able to get, I think, 2 or 3 observations of 6231 from Nova Scotia. So it is possible to see it as far north as probably about 46 degrees north latitude.
Interesting. Well, that's good to know. I guess that might be the cutoff.
Yeah. If you keep going down and follow that stinger along the horizon, and then it loops back up, or if you're here where we are and you can't quite do that, you can see these 2 stars, Shala and Lesev, and they form the sort of that stinger, the actual stinger part. Yeah, and they sometimes I think they're referred to as the cat's eyes. Not sure if you ever heard of them called the cat's eyes before.
No, I don't think so. That doesn't stand out. No,
I think they kind of look like cat's eyes, kind of looking back to you. Like they kind of look like, oftentimes, like they're just sort of sitting over the horizon. Kind of looks like something kind of peering back at you.
Well, I'll have to look for that next time. I'd love to.
Yeah, just east of there is the butterfly cluster. Not sure, Messier 6. What do you think? I think it really looks like the butterfly.
Yeah. This is another one. Like you mentioned, Scorpius actually looks like a scorpion. And this is a cluster where, I think it is pretty evident. It does look like a butterfly.
Yeah. And it does rise high enough and it's bright enough that it's fairly easy to see, even from our latitude there. And there's a lot of other things in that area of the sky. If you kind of go down to the southeast, you land at Ptolemy's cluster M7. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think Ptolemy's cluster looks anything like Ptolemy.
Yeah, agreed.
There is a tiny little cluster there, NGC 6453, that kind of appears caught up in M7. Have you ever looked at that? I've looked at it once, I think.
I don't think I've ever looked at that one.
It just looks like a star on most telescopes, and then if you get access to a bigger scope and you're maybe a little bit further south, it's kind of interesting to see this globular caught up in M7. And then there's some dark nebulae. I've looked at these. B287 in the southern part is within the cluster. So like inside the cluster itself, you can actually see this dark nebulae. It's not that large. And then B283 extends out of the north over the Milky Way because it's a really bright, rich area of sky down there. So maybe I should say what these B objects are. They can be a little bit more challenging. But do you know what the B objects are, Shane? Do you know what they stand for?
Isn't that the Barnard catalog?
Yeah, so it's the Barnard catalog. And do you, off the top of your head, and I don't like to put you on the spot, but you're pretty good at this. Do you remember what kind of objects they are?
Yeah, they're all dark nebulae. That's one of Barnard's claims to fame is he really I think was paramount in cataloging the dark nebulae up there and that region of the sky, Scorpius and Sagittarius, because you're looking kind of into the heart of the Milky Way. The dark nebulae really pops there because there's just so many stars, and when you start to see a void of stars, you're looking at some dark nebula, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and so what he was doing in the late 1800s, early 1900s is he at first was purely visual, and then he started using some of the early astrophoto lenses to take photographs of the Milky Way and sort of running through that process for the first time. Now it's sort of commonplace to see amateurs going out and taking beautiful photographs of the Milky Way. Well, he was really pretty much like the first person that sort of dedicated their observing to actually going out and trying to figure out what this thing was that we're looking at. Now, originally, people like Herschel, like William Herschel, and I think John Herschel as well, they thought that perhaps these things were voids, like almost black holes. And it was Barnard who, and this is like a perfect example of an amateur's approach. So Barnard was really an amateur. He wasn't a trained professional astronomer. He had gone and taught some astronomy courses and was enrolled in astronomy courses, but he was really a self-taught amateur that had become a professional. And he was sitting out, I think it was when he had the Bruce telescope down on Mount Wilson in around like 1905. And he was taking photographs, and the clouds rolled in, Shane.
Shocking.
Shocking. And in true style, Barnard simply just sort of put the cap on the telescope or put it on pause or whatever, and sort of just kicked back and was just looking at the night sky as these clouds were passing by. And it occurred to him, it's like sort of one of those eureka moments that often, although they get described as eureka moments in science, they typically don't happen the way that we think of it. But he really did have one. And it occurred to him that perhaps these dark objects or these dark things that he was seeing weren't voids in the sky. They were simply clouds that were unilluminated, that were simply like these clouds passing between the observer and the brighter Milky Way in the background. And then, of course, as he began to think about this and to look at the results of his observing and his photographs, you could kind of see how some of the stars around the edges of these were actually coming through that weren't visible visually, and that they were reddened. And then when, of course, they did further investigation, they found that they were reddened by dust and gas, and that he was indeed correct. These were simply dust and gas clouds that were unilluminated that are passing just between our vantage point here on Earth and these Milky Way clouds in the background. So kind of a fascinating story behind those. They can be a little bit of a challenge to see, eh?
Yeah, they can be for sure. The larger ones, even not necessarily larger, but if they're in a star-rich area of the sky, it becomes a lot easier. But yeah, they can be challenging nonetheless. It's kind of it's just a strange object to observe because we're often chasing light, and now you're chasing the absence of light, which is odd for us.
Yeah. I think, though, the dark nebulae, as they've come to be known, have a little bit of a bad rap because of perhaps the most famous one, Barnard 33, although it was discovered by Wilhelmina Fleming, which is the Horsehead Nebula. Mm. And that's just like ridiculously faint and fairly challenging to see, because it's a small dark nebulae that is superimposed on the bright nebula, which is actually a pretty faint nebula called IC 434, I think, if I'm remembering off the top of my head. And so that one is a fairly challenging object to try to see, whereas other objects aren't as difficult. I think like Barnard 287, like I mentioned here, I think that one is actually much easier than the Horsehead. And then there's tons that are easier. If people want to start looking at these, the best one that I recommend, strangely enough, Barnard's first set of initials, he went by E.E. Barnard. And there actually is a Barnard Z, which is comprised of Barnard, I think it's 142 and 143, up in Aquila, just off of Terrazed and Altair. And that makes a great learning ground, because some of those ones up there are actually fairly easy to see. And then there's some other ones that are sort of in and around the Sagittarius star cloud. But anyway, I'm getting off Scorpius here now.
Yeah, I had some words. They're gone.
That's okay. That's okay. So if we go to the southwest, this is sort of where things get a little bit more challenging. So, we've talked about some of these easier objects, which are among my favorites that I like to visit every time I'm out in the summer. But if you go southwest of Messier 7, and you need a pretty darn good horizon at 49 degrees north to see this, but that's where I first saw it. is a large star cloud called NGC 6455. And in some of the atlases, it's often mistaken for an open cluster, but John Herschel found it on June 7th, 1837. He mentions it as a cluster partially resolved, some stars seen, stars extremely small, plus nebulae. And then it's been later noted by Dreyer that it's probably a mere enhancement of the Milky Way background. I think that's probably true and accurate. However, that area of NGC 6455, which is a large, at least in my opinion, star cloud, is well visible to the unaided eye, especially if you're at 49 degrees north or further south. And so when you look at M7, just kind of stand back and look, or take your really wide field binoculars and pan just to the southwest of M7, you'll see this star cloud there, which I think is quite beautiful. And it really dwarfs M7 quite a bit. This star cloud is quite neat to see, and most people have never really bothered to take a look at it.
Well, that is interesting.
Yeah. So going up and north, basically due north of Shola, we have NGCs 6334 and 6357. These are the Cat's Paw and the Lobster nebulae. Have you ever seen these ones? The Cat's Paw and the Lobster?
Yeah, Cat's Paw I have. I'm not sure. I don't think I've seen the Lobster.
I find the Cat's Paw more challenging than the Lobster. I was looking at the Lobster recently, but usually the way I run over them is that I've accidentally scanned too far in a hunt for M8 and Messier M20 and 21, and then I've done this. The two times I've found them like this, I was using new instruments, most recently my Comet Catcher, which is 5.5-inch super fast wide field scope. And then years ago, I had bought a pair of 22 by 100 binoculars, and it was the same thing. I had sort of misjudged where I was pointing my new telescope and had landed on these sets of objects, and there's lots of other stuff in the field. And I thought, oh, this telescope isn't very good because it's really not showing M8 and M21 very well at all. And but it turns out that we're actually looking at objects that are several magnitudes fainter and difficult to see.
Yeah, that changes things quite a bit.
Yeah, it does. So yeah, anyway, so I always enjoy kind of running over those. So they're a little bit challenging from this latitude because they're pretty far south. They're really just just northwest of Shola. And they're further south, or just a touch south of M4, and we've even had a lot of just regular decent nights where M4 is not visible because the sky and the atmosphere is just too thick once we get that low down.
Yeah, that's always a challenge. At this latitude, is anything near the horizon. You really do need a great night to observe it properly, and that's never guaranteed. It's, in fact, more often than not, it's just not that great around that part of the sky.
Yeah, if you do get a good night, the Cat's Paw is worth taking a look. It's an emission nebula, has a red color in photographs, and it originates from the red coloring. It originates from the ionized hydrogen particles, and these stars are nearly 10 times the mass of our sun. And they were only born a few million years ago, so it's a pretty new area. And so the stars that you're seeing there are relatively young, and that emission nebula is where they were birthed out of. And then talking about the Lobster Nebula, I find the Lobster Nebula actually really easy to find because it's at the end of this really distinct chain of seventh magnitude stars. And then the nebula also has an open cluster complex called Pismus 24, I think. And there's a lot of massive stars here. Some of the most massive stars, according to NASA, but they don't really know why these massive stars are in this area. And like I said, it has Pismus 24 there near the center, and it's home to these super, large, massive stars. And there's an overall blue glow near the inner region, which is a result of ionized hydrogen gas. So just another set of more challenging, mostly because of our latitude. I think probably if you're observing in Australia or somewhere, maybe these are pretty easy binocular targets.
Well, there you go. Further south, you go, the better you are here.
Do you ever see those beautiful wide field shots of Antares, where you can see like M4 and all the dust and gas that's in there? Do you ever see?
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, and they're often called like the Roa-Afiyuki region, although Antares is in Scorpius. The main part of that dust cloud is actually north in Ophiuchus. But the larger portion of the cloud is Vandenberg 107. However, surrounding Antares itself is the Linz Bright Nebula, or LBN 1103, which is an H2 region, and it extends south by several degrees. It doesn't actually photograph very well. It shows it yellow in the photographs. And I had no inkling to make this observation, but I was observing one of the first nights Mike had his 15 by 50 Canon image stabilized binoculars. We went out on a night sort of on the first or second week of June. I wanted to see the perpetual twilight, and it looked like a really good night. So we thought, well, we'll go out and I can fill my boots and see that once for a good night. And kind of once you stay up all night and watch it once, you've kind of seen it. But I had really wanted to see it. And we thought, well, we'll just kick back and do some binocular observing. I don't even think we brought telescopes with us, but we did go to a really, really dark spot, like a Bortle 2 class site. And we were way up high on a hill, about 33,000 feet elevation. And as we kind of watched perpetual twilight, once we got into that really dark zone of the night around like 12:30, quarter to 1, started scanning around this area. And I picked up that Linz Bright Nebula 1103 extending south by, I think, like 3 degrees south of Antares. And really quite surprised because I didn't know that was a visually observable nebula.
Well, I'm trying to think. I don't know if I've ever heard of really anybody observing that one. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I'd always tried going for the Roa-Afiyuki Nebula, which is around those 3 stars of Roa-Afiyukus, which is north of there, which is a blue reflection and dark nebulae complex. And that's really tough. But I didn't see that on this occasion. I did see this other nebulae. So that is possible. There is a super challenging reflection nebula. If you go north, remember we were talking about Grapheus earlier?
Yep.
Just sort of in that general region, and a little bit further to the north of there is New Scorpii, and there's a reflection nebula called the Blue Horsehead Nebulae, and it's IC 4592. It's really tough to see, and
it's huge, though, hey?
It's really big. Yeah. I can't say that I've been successful. It's one of those things where kind of sort of thought I've seen it, but I keep going after it because we talked about Barnard earlier, the discoverer of the dark nebulae, and it was Barnard who found this. And I believe he was actually observing visually in 6-inch, or 6.5-inch refractor on Mount Hamilton in 1895. So he wasn't too far south. I think that's like maybe like 35 or 36 degrees north latitude, just outside of San Francisco there. And he was able to hunt that down visually, and that is a tough object to see. Yeah. Have you ever even tried for that one? You've seen the photos of it, I know, but have you tried even to look for it?
No. And when Mike and I were looking at Grapheus at Grasslands a few weeks ago, we were right there with a 12-inch and a 4-inch, and neither one of us noticed it. Now, in the same breath, I'll say that we weren't looking for it, but, it certainly didn't stand out.
Yeah. So anyway, that's sort of where I'm gonna trail off here, because we'll trail off on one that I've continued to hunt for like more than a dozen years. So maybe somebody else have better luck, and I would love to hear from. I know we have some observers further south in Brazil and Australia and other more southerly climates than us. I'd be really excited to hear if somebody is able maybe to hunt down IC 4592, because I have not been successful, but continue to try. Okay, Shane, do you have anything else to add to this episode?
No. I talked a little bit there about a couple doubles, and just that Scorpius is a neat constellation in terms of variety of objects. lots of different nebulae, including a lot of dark nebulae in and around there, and some interesting clusters. And yeah, great constellation.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Clint, for the suggestion, and thanks to Jim for sending along the list of constellations to deep dive into. I know I started with one we already covered a little bit before, but I've been observing it recently, and I just sort of have a passion sometimes to speak of what I'm diving into, and as well, I think it was like way back, according to what I remember looking at in Jim's notes, that it was like episode 37 or something. So that's like more than maybe about 2 years ago or something like that when we were talking about it.
Oh yeah, cool.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Well, thanks, Shane. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We're always excited to get your observing emails to actualastronomy@gmail.com. And we appreciate any support people make through Patreon.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show. If you are interested in more information, would like to contact us, or if you would like to support the podcast, check out our website, actualastronomy.com.